Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रक्षुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाबोधं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good afternoon, everyone. It's snowing outside, certainly in Nottingham. So I hope it's snowing in some parts of the UK and the other parts of the world. They're all enjoying good summer and good weather. Anyway, it's very cold here. Let's move on. So let's directly dig into this. So we are doing Katha Upanishad, and today is the second session of Katha Upanishad. Last week we did some entry into the background to it. So let's look at the contextual relevance. Om Ushan Havai Vajashravasah Sarva Vedasam Dadau Tasya Hana Nachiketo Nama Putra Asa Tamha Kumaram Santam Dakshinasu Niyamanasu Shraddha Vivesha So Amanyata Pito Daraka Dugda Thruna Dugda Doha Nirindriyaha Ananda Namate Lokaha Tansagachati Ta Dadat Saho Vacha Pitaram Tatakasmai Mam Dasyasiti Dvitiyam Tritiyam Tamho Vacham Mrityave Tva Dadamiti. So this is where we finished the last class, the introduction to Katha Upanishad. And we had a review saying that Katha Upanishad is one of the key Upanishads that comes in Krishna Yajur Veda. The other Upanishad in Krishna Yajur Veda is Taittiriya Upanishad. So Katha Upanishad, the Rishi is Kata Rishi, Nachiketa is a Rishi, as well as Yama is a Rishi, the Devata is Vamana Namaka Paramatma, and the Chandas is Anushtup Chandas. So we always pay our obeisance to the Kata Rishi, because without him discovering these mantras and these verses of Katha Upanishad, folks like us would never have had the opportunity to sit down here and do these kind of contemplation. So what actually happened? So Vajashravasaha, who is also known as Uddalaka, who is also called Uddalaka Arunihi, he had a desire. He had a desire that he wants to go to Swarga, or the heavenly planetary system, to enjoy whatever that he wanted to enjoy in the heavenly planetary system. So to accomplish that, he decided that he is going to do Vishwajit Yajna. And as a part of the Vishwajit Yajna, you are supposed to donate all your wealth. Whatever you have, you donate to people. So that is called Sarva Veda Samdado. So Uddalaka had lots of cows. So what he decided to do was, all the good cows, he gave it to his relatives, whereas all the old useless cows, he gave it to he gave it to all those, brahmanas or gurus who had come to the Gurukula, to come to his ashrama. So he gave all these useless cows to the brahmanas who had come to the ashrama. So our friend Nachiketa was looking at all this, and he is still less than 10 years old and likely to be around 8 years of age when this was happening in his father's hermitage. So our Nachiketa was looking at this, and he was a bit disappointed the way in which his father was behaving, of actually giving these kind of useless cows to everybody. But he was so respectful of his dad, and he didn't want to insult his father by actually telling him off, saying, Dad, are you crazy? Why are you giving these old cows to others? That is not what he said. That is not how he approached this problem to his dad. He was very respectful, and he said, Dad, instead of his view, at least so amanyata. So that is what he was thinking. He was thinking, Dad, you're giving useless cows to these brahmanas. And for them, these useless cows are of no use to them. They are not going to give milk. They are not going to be of any purpose to them. At least if you give me to one of the brahmanas, at least I can serve them. I can cook for them. I can fetch the sticks. I can graze the cows. I can get the milk, and at least I can do seva to that brahmana. That way, at least the purpose of your Vishwajit Yajna is satisfied. So that is what he was thinking. His intention was very, very pure of actually finding a method by which he could persuade his dad to give him to somebody else so that he can be of use compared to these useless cows. So he first asked his dad that. His dad was very busy in the Vishwajit Yajna and giving dana, so he ignored him first time around. But second time around, he goes and asks, and then again third time he goes and he sort of shakes his dad, or he touches him and distracts him and says, Tata kasmai ma dasyati iti. So his dad gets a bit irritated at that point. He flips and he says, Mrityave tva dadami iti. So that is the first scene, if you like, of what actually happened last week. So our friend Nachiketa then actually falls down. He collapses. Okay. So that is the scene 2, if you like. So he collapses. So now there is, once this has happened, there is a whole philosophy that opens up now. So before we go into the philosophy, I just want us to think about this a bit more, because we are all rational individuals here, right? So we are all professionals in our own right. So we want what actually happened to Nachiketa. So that's a key question. So now Nachiketa, as soon as his father told him, Mrityave tva dadami iti, Nachiketa falls down, he collapses. Okay. So there are 3 views here with regards to the philosophy, because we all know then Nachiketa said, okay, dad asked me to go to Yamaloka, so I am going to Yamaloka. So that is a very easy way of progressing with Katha Upanishad. But we just need to pause here a little bit and ask ourselves the question, what actually happened here? So our Nachiketa collapsed. So there are only 3 possibilities here. Number 1, did Nachiketa have yogic powers so that he could voluntarily leave his gross body, carry his subtle body? We all know, we all carry subtle bodies, and then the gross body is our body, our human body, or a dog's body, or a pig's body, whatever. So if we have to go to subtle worlds, what is very clear is you cannot go to Yamaloka with this gross body. It is just not what is said in the scriptures. It cannot happen. So one thing is sure, that Nachiketa has to leave his gross body and make his trip to Yamaloka. Okay, so he has to go with the subtle body. So you and me, we can't at our whims and fancies, at our will, actually give up this gross body and decide that we are going to leave this body and go elsewhere. But Shastras tell us about great yogis, great people of great meditative powers, who are actually are able to have this out of body experience. They can actually go out of their body and then look at their own body with regards to what's happening. There are folks who can actually travel, is what the Shastras say. And the Tibetan Buddhism, the meditative practices of Tibetan Buddhism actually explains as to how many Tibetan Buddhist monks have been able to accomplish this with regards to giving up their body at will, not committing suicide, but going into deep meditation and just making that exit out of the gross body. So one possibility there, of course, is possibly our friend Nachiketa. Although he was only 8 years of age, he had so much yogic powers that he was able to do that. Okay, so that is one possibility. The other possibility is Nachiketa collapsed and he was just there unconscious. And when he was unconscious, he had an inner vision. He had an inner vision that he was actually going to Yamaloka and that he met a lot of folks on the way. And then he had a conversation with Yama's wife. And then he had the discourse with Yama. Okay, so a type of inner vision. If you want to call it as a dream, that's fine. A kind of inner vision or a dream possibly is what Nachiketa had. That is the second possibility. Or the third possibility is this is just a good story. Some guy just wrote a very good story about this whole incident, which makes interesting readings. So those are the three possibilities: yogic powers, inner vision, or just a fictitious good story. So I'm going to pause there for a minute and get a view in with friends here as to what they think is going on here. So what do they feel is the possible or the possibilities here? Can I have some contributions here, please? Okay, dead silence, which is fine because we are doing Katha Upanishad and we are going towards Yamaloka. Pragnesh ji.
Turiya state.
So you think he went for Turiya state? Remember, Turiya state is only in Moksha. Yeah,
Okay.
Turiya. The fourth state described in Mandukya Upanishad is a state of Moksha, where you actually even give up the subtle body and then you go to the trans-empirical plane. So yeah, that's an interesting thought, Pragnesh. Thank you. Anybody else has a different view here? Okay, so let me take this on. So the third possibility is out of question. This is not a good story. Why? Because Katha Upanishad is part of the Yajur Veda. It is part of the Krishna Yajur Veda. Krishna Yajur Veda is a part of the Vedas. Vedas are what? They are aporushayatvat Vedasya. They are the supreme authority of truths. So they talk only about the truth, and the Vedas are not going to give us some fictitious stories here. The Vedas are only going to talk about ultimate truths. So it is not a story. So then we have two views here, whether he was a yogi, that he was able to transcend his material gross body at will and go to subtle planes, or was it all a vision for Nachiketa? So there are two views here among the academics, if you like, and there is always different views in academics, and that is the beauty of our Sanatana Dharma. Some view that Nachiketa was such a great yogi that as soon as his father said, go to Yamaloka, Mrityavetva Dadami iti, he made that trip. So that is one view. The other view is this was just a vision. He collapsed and he had an inner vision. Like we all have inner vision when we go to bed at night, whatever our inner vision may be, but Nachiketa had a deeper philosophical inner vision when it happens. So those are the two schools of thought. I just want you to hold on to that idea because I'll come to the details of it. So one thing is clear. Nachiketa has to give up his gross body to make those travel to the subtle worlds. And last week, I also told you that to understand the episode of Nachiketa, one has to know that the Nachiketa story is also described in Mahabharata. Nachiketa's incident is also described in the Rig Veda. It is also described in Taittiriya Brahmanam, and it is also described in Varaha Purana, for example. So you have to put all these together and then understand what happens. And again, that is an important concept that I want to illustrate here, that our ancient rishis did not put all the facts of the case in one book, for example. They had these facts of case in different books so that we as seekers can make our effort. We can make our effort to understand what is happening. So it was always going to be an individual efforts by the seeker, and the rishi will only give some kind of a hint as to what's happening. So we have to do our homework to understand what actually happened to Nachiketa. So what I have done is, from all that I have learned from my gurus, I've just put this all in this slide to illustrate what actually happened. So our Nachiketa comes out of the gross body and makes his way to the subtle worlds with his subtle body. So in Taittiriya Brahmanam describes where on his route he meets Vak Devata, Saraswati. He meets Vak Devata and then he has a conversation with Vak Devata. And the Vak Devata actually tells Nachiketa, look, Nachiketa, you're going to go to Yama's abode. Yama is not going to give you darshana for 3 days. You will have to wait there for 3 days. So when Yama eventually appears, he is going to ask you for he is going to offer you 3 varas, boons, and then it is your opportunity to ask boon 1, 2, and 3, and so on. So Vak Devata actually gives him there is a discourse from Vak Devata. That information you can actually gather from Taittiriya Brahmana. Okay, so then our Nachiketa, after meeting Vak Devata, then he enters, he comes and reaches the Yamaloka. So when he reaches Yamaloka, again in Mahabharata and Varaha Purana, there is actually an initial discussion that happens between Nachiketa and Yama. Nachiketa says, Yama, hi, I've come this far, but I want to have a tour. I want to see what's happening in your world. What happens in Swarga and what happens in Naraka? What happens to all these souls? Can you just show me? Can I have a tour first? So Nachiketa is very curious to find out. That is the story in Mahabharata and Varaha Purana. So Yama says, okay, mate, no problem. So he gets one of his Yamadutas. They actually show him. He goes on a tour. He goes on a tour to see what's happening in Naraka and Swarga and so on. So that is a story that is described in Varaha Purana. And then, of course, we have Katha Upanishad, where the Katha Upanishad now says what actually happened. So you need to understand this interaction between Vakdevata and Nachiketa, and the initial interaction between Yama and Nachiketa of Mahabharata and Varaha Purana to understand the next subsequent verses that actually come in Katha Upanishad. Okay, so the Katha Upanishad actually, what does it say? He says Nachiketa went to Yama's abode, and then he waited there for 3 days in Yamaloka. So that we are all very familiar. He says the Upanishad says he waited for 3 days. Now here is a big problem. Okay, for rational people like us, 3 days in Yamaloka is actually equal to 3 years on earth. Okay, and this is the beauty of Sanatana Dharma, which time was relative. Yeah, the earth time is based on this sun and the earth rotating around it, and then the number of days and night and years and so on is based on this sun. But the rishis of the Sanatana Dharma knew all along that there are so many other worlds out there of various levels, and there the time scale should be different. So, for example, for Devatas, one day, one day of Devata equals 1 year on earth. Okay. If you look at Chaturmukha Brahma is even more. 1 second for Chaturmukha Brahma equals 100,000 years on earth. Yeah, so that is the concept of relative time that was very prevalent among the Vedic time, and now we know a cosmologist of modern physics, they accept this whole relativity of time and how time can be stretched and so on and so forth. Okay, so 3 days in Yamaloka actually is 3 years on earth. So imagine if our friend Nachiketa was actually, he fell unconscious and he left his gross body and went to Yamaloka and waited there for 3 days. That would actually mean he actually waited on earth for 3 years. So the 3 years means he's already had 3 shraddhas. His gross body, usually in the Vedic time, is buried within a few hours. Yeah. And then 3 years means he's had 3 shraddhas by then. Okay. So that is that is the interesting twist here. So there are some internal clues within the Katha Upanishad to actually tell us that possibly this was a vision. This possibly was a vision for Nachiketa, because if it was not a vision, and if the Katha Upanishad is saying 3 days that he was waiting in Yamaloka, then it becomes 3 years on earth. So there is one view which says that this is all a vision, but some of you may still feel that this is all yogic powers of Nachiketa, and then he went there. But I have also seen some unfortunate transliterations that talk about that this is all just a story. And again, good luck to them who view this just as a story, because this is Apaurushaya Veda that is talking, so it can talk only the truth. Okay, so I hope you find that background prelude interesting, because that sets the scene. So why? Because our friend collapses. As soon as our friend collapses, Uddalaka then actually realizes the mistake that he has done, and he is actually holding his son, and he is actually upset, and he is crying all night. And then what happens? Nachiketa wakes up after a few hours. Okay, and then our Uddalaka is very happy. So if you put that whole story, the whole sequence of events, then possibly this was all a vision for Nachiketa. He might have yogic powers and the ability to leave his gross body, but what happened next was possibly a vision. Okay, I hope you're able to hold on to that thought, and that note, the number 3 starts appearing. Look at this, 3 possibilities. And then he waited for 3 days. So now we move to the next verse. So when he was making this trip to Yamaloka in his subtle body, he was thinking. And what was he thinking? Bahuna memi pratamo, bahuna memi madhyamaha, kim swid yamasya kartavyam yenmaya adya karishyati. So as I said before, this chap said, okay, I will go because my father has instructed me to go to Yamaloka. I will go to Yamaloka. I will go to Yamaloka as what? One among the millions who have gone in front of me and one among the millions who are going to follow me. This is not a unique position for me because at some point I will have to make that trip. We will all have to make the trip. So that is what Nachiketa is telling us in this verse. We are all going to make this trip at some point. It may be in a few years' time, it may be in a few decades' time, whatever. But ultimately, we will be in this position that we as souls will be joining this queue at some point to go to that Yamaloka. And as we discussed last time, this philosophy brings about in that Yaksha Prashne in Aranya Parva of Mahabharata, when Yaksha asked, what is the most amazing thing? And Dharmaraja, who is Yama's incarnation, what did he say? Ahanyahani bhutani gachanti iha Yama alayam seshaha stavaram icchanti kim ashcharyam ataha param. So although we see these people constantly joining this queue and going to Yamaloka, when we see people dying in front of us, we don't realize that our turn is going to come sooner or later. We somehow assume that this is not going to happen to me. I'm going to be here like a tree. Stavaram icchanti. Yeah, I'm going to be here forever is what we think when we do witness this. But in that Yaksha Prashna, that is considered as one of the most amazing things that we as human do in our lives, that we don't understand our own imminent mortality, and whatever time we have, we just need to make good use of it. And it is with that kind of a view, Nachiketa says, Bahuna memi pratamaha, Bahuna memi madhyamaha. And then as he is doing this trip, he is still thinking along this, oh, look, my dad is, if my dad only has given me to some Brahmana, I would have actually helped him in his village, in his hermitage, and done some seva to him. What use am I going to be to Yama? Is Yama going to make me an Yamaduta and ask me to go and pick all these souls? No, I'm not even capable of that. I'm not going to be of any use to Yama. Why did my dad is sending me to Yama? So that was his view at that point. That is how he was thinking when he made the trip. So as he is making the trip, we now move to the next verse. This is the new verse for this week. So as he is making this trip to Yamaloka, the Yamadutas actually take him. They take him in the journey to Yamaloka. And there is this amazing verse. This is Yamaduta actually says, this Yamaduta is actually telling Nachiketa, Anupashya yata purve pratipashya tata pare. Sasyamiva martyaha pachyate sasyamiva jayate punaha. Okay, this is a profound philosophical verse that Yamaduta actually tells Nachiketa, look Nachiketa, what is going on you wanted the tour, right? You wanted to look at what is happening in Yamaloka and in Swargaloka. Look what is happening in the Yamaloka. What is happening? Anupashya yata purve pratipashya yata parve. So anupashya yata purve. What does that anupashya mean? Anubhuya pasya. Experience what you're seeing. Experience is the ultimate truth. Yeah, you have to experience, then you know it is true. So he says, Anupashya, Anubhuya Pashya. See what is happening to all these souls in Narakaloka. In Naraka, what is happening to them? Look at, enjoy. I won't say enjoy, but actually appreciate, experience what is happening to these jivas is what the Yamaduta is saying. And then he says, what you're seeing now that is going on to them, similarly, in future, it is going to be the same. There is this batch of jivas who are actually going through this process. Pratipashya tata pare. Pratipashya means pratyekam pashya. Every soul that comes in the future will also have to go through this process. So what is that the Yamaduta is taking? Yamaduta is taking this tour, right, of Narakaloka to Nachiketa and saying, look at this Kumbhipaka. What is happening in Kumbhipaka? You might have heard those Kumbhipakas, where they're in Naraka. What is happening? There are these big vessels and these jivas are being boiled there for all their sins that they are committing. Okay, this is a very pictorial view of it. It's up to us whether we want to take it literally or to give an idea that the souls in Naraka actually suffer pain because of all the bad deeds that they've done on the gross world. So this is a pictorial representation of how it would be. Only when we go and experience it, we will actually know. But that is what our Yamaduta is telling Nachiketa, Anupashya, Anupashya, Pratipashya. And then he says, you know what this is? The Narakaloka, all these souls are all going through these various things. You know how that is? Sasyamiva martyaha pachyate, sasyamiva jayate punaha. It's an amazing analogy that this Yamaduta gives. Sasya means what? Sasya means your vegetables and all the cereals, rice, dal, and everything that you cook. That is Sasya. And Martyaha means what? Martyaha means Marana Shilaha. That is you and me. We are all Martyahas because we are all capable of death, in the sense that we are all capable of giving our gross bodies. So the Yamaduta there is comparing these sasyas, these vegetables, to Martyaha. Martyaha means the jivas that have the subtle bodies that undergo punishment for all the bad deeds that they are doing in the gross material world. Okay, so sasyamiva martyaha pachyate. Pachyate means how they are cooked. Look how the vegetables are cooked here on the right side of this PowerPoint slide. How the vegetables are cooked under fire in a vessel. Similarly, look in Narakaloka. That vessel is called Kumbhipaka, where all these jivas, for all the bad deeds they have done, they are being cooked. Yeah, sasyamiva martyaha pachyate. Okay, and then what happens to these fellows who are cooked? Once they have completed their enjoyment of their suffering, if you like, in Kumbhipaka, what happens to them after that? They will actually come back to Mrityuloka again. They will again come back to the cycle. They'll come back to Mrityuloka and again go through this eternal cycle. So what happens there? Sasyamiva jayate punaha. So like how the vegetables, you've eaten them, and then so once these jivas, once they are cooked and they have suffered, enjoyed their suffering, then they will be born again in Mrityuloka. How? Sasyamiva jayate punaha. Okay. Now, to understand the deepest philosophy, so this is all the deepest philosophy of Katha Upanishad, and we should take an opportunity when we read these verses to understand what is it that the Upanishad is telling us. Is it just trying to tell us and scare us that, look, there is Kumbhipaka and that you will be boiled and so on? No, that is not the purpose of Upanishads. It is to tell you the fundamental existential questions of life. Why do I say that? This Kumbhipaka and compared to how the vegetables are cooked in our kitchen are pretty much the same. And I'll tell you how. For that, I will have to take you back to Chandogya Upanishad. Okay, so we did Chandogya Upanishad, right? A few weeks ago, we completed Chandogya Upanishad. So I briefly told you last time. The 6th chapter, of course, is this great philosophical discussion between Uddalaka and his first son, Shvetaketu. But our friend Shvetaketu, that is like you and me, we are all Shvetaketus, as you know. I certainly am a Shvetaketu. So this Shvetaketu, when he was 10 years of age, he went to a king. This king was called Pravahana Jaivali. Okay, has anybody heard of this story? Does anybody want to sort of contribute at this stage as to what happened to Shvetaketu when he went to Pravahana Jaivali? I'll just pause there for a minute just to sip some water. Anybody has a background information, please share with us. Okay, no problem. So in Chandogya Upanishad 5, so what happens is Shvetaketu goes to Pravahana Jaivali. Pravahana Jaivali is a great Kshatriya and a Kshatriya of great intelligence and Vedic knowledge. So in the Vedic times, there were certain aspects of Vedic knowledge that was preserved by Kshatriyas, kings, rajas, chakravartis. Yeah. And Shvetaketu goes to his kingdom to show off how much he knows about Brahman. This fellow always does that. He'll always go to show off and then get beaten up and then come back with his tails between his legs. That's the classic feature of Shvetaketu in the Upanishad. So he goes to Pravahana Jaivili and he says, look, I know how to worship Brahman. I know everything about Brahman. So Pravahana Jaivili will ask him some questions. And this fellow, as usual, does not know. So again, look at these verses. Na Bhagavayati, Na Bhagavayati. Every question that Pravahana Jaivili asks him, our friend Shvetaketu will say, Na Bhagavayati. I don't know this. I don't know that. Okay. There is one question that Pravahana Jaivili asks, which is very relevant to what our Yamaduta is telling to Nachiketa. And I just want to bring this up here. Okay. Veta yata panchamayam ahutav apaha purusha vachaso bhavantiti. So this is called Panchagni Vidya of Chandogya Upanishad, which is a very key concept in Sanatana Dharma. What that Panchagni Vidya is, it talks about the journey of souls. What happens to the soul, for example, once the soul leaves the gross body, it goes up, then it goes to Swargaloka, Narakaloka, whatever, and then eventually it comes back to earth. So this particular Vidya called Panchagni Vidya of Chandogya Upanishad, chapter 5, second Kanda, talks about this 5 Agnis, Panchagni. Okay, what that means is the 5 stages of the journey of souls and how in each stage this Agni Narayana controls it. So that is the discussion. So the story, the view there of the Upanishad and Sanatana Dharma is how is a new baby born? Have we ever thought about how a new baby is born? We all think it comes from the sperm and the egg and it's fertilized and that's how a new baby is born. So I'll give you a different view as to how the Upanishads and the Rishis view this. So souls are eternal. They are not going to go away, but they always carry subtle bodies. Subtle bodies have karmic impressions, right? And based on your karmic impressions, you will go to our Chitragupta, who will read all your bad and good deeds and decide what happens to you. So let's say you have spent a few hundred years in Swargaloka. You will finish all that enjoyment, then you'll come back. How do you come back? Yeah, how do you come back? From Swargaloka, how do you come back to mortal life? So Rishis talk about this. So the first step is that from Swarga, you will come down into the clouds. Okay. From the clouds, you will fall down with raindrops on earth. And when there is rain on earth, you have all these aushadis, vanaspatis and aushadis, all these plants, vegetables that all grow. So you make entry into the vegetables and all the food that you're going to eat. So that is sasya. So all these vegetables. Then what happens? Somebody plucks all these vegetables and then they cook the vegetables. And then what happens once you cook the vegetable? A man and a woman, they eat the vegetables. So when a man eats the vegetable, what happens is these vegetables have millions and millions of jivas in them. So in that sense, nobody can claim to be a vegetarian from a Rishi's perspective. If you look at it in a very philosophical sense, when we cook our vegetables, according to the view of the Rishis, there are millions and millions of jivas with their subtle bodies in those vegetables, waiting to get into a Purusha. So they get into the Purusha. The Purusha then digests the food. It goes to his testicles and he makes sperms. Each sperm carries a jiva. And then there is fertilization. And then after that fertilization, a baby is born. What happens to this baby? This baby again does all sorts of karmas in this world. After 100 years, this person will die, go to Yamaloka and go through this process again and again. Okay, so this is the Panchagni Vidya. Very interesting. Hopefully we can deal with it at some point. But I've just given you a very, very brief overview of what Panchagni Vidya is. So in that stage, the third stage, note again, number 3. The third stage there is the vegetables are getting cooked in the gross body. And that is how this jiva gets birth. This cooking is very similar to what happens in Naraka, in Kumbhipaka, where the subtle bodies are also cooked and then they eventually make their way into the world. So that is the philosophical approach of this verse. Yeah, rather than just saying, okay, just how you're being fried in Kumbhipaka, look at this, oh, be scared now. No, that is not the intention. It is for us to understand this whole cycle. That's why he says here, sasyamiva martyaha pachyate sasyamiva jayate punaha. They get cooked and then they'll be born. Again, they get cooked. Again, they are born. How is that similar? Similar to this process. Cooked as vegetables, get into sperms, get fertilized, get born, go up, come down. It is the same cycle that you need to realize. And look, Nachiketa saying the Yamaduta, look what's happening in Naraka. This is what these fellows are going and experiencing all this. You look at this and experience this truth. Okay, so what happened next? So our friend, just to bring you back again, subtle body, subtle worlds. He's seeing all these what's happening in Yamaloka. Then he goes to the palace of Yamaloka and he goes and says, can I see Yama? So Yama is not giving him darshan. Yama is not there for 3 days. And so says this, some transliteration. But actually what it means is Yama is always there in Yamaloka. He doesn't go on tours. He doesn't go on business trips. He is always there in Yamaloka. He does not give him darshan for 3 days. That is Nachiketa's vision. Remember, he is having that vision that he is waiting for 3 days and Yama is not giving him darshan. Okay. So at that point, this lady comes, Shyamala. So I'm going to pause for a minute and ask, who is Shyamala? Shyamala Devi. Who is, we got few people who have named Shyamala, but who is Shyamala of the Vedic pantheon?
Yama's wife.
Sorry, Yama's wife. Thank you, Pratibhaji. Yeah. So Shyamala Devi is Yamadeva's, Yamaraja's wife. Okay. So Shyamala sees this young boy waiting at the entrance of Yama's palace. And she says, Nachiketa, please come in, have some food, have some water. So Nachiketa refuses to come in and insists on seeing Yama first because his father has sent him to Yama, not to Shyamala. So he said, my dad has asked me to go to Yama. So I will not enter the house until I see Yama because I have to talk to him. Okay. So he waits for 3 days and 3 nights. And then Yama arrives after 3 days. That is the story. Okay. But this is an inner vision for Nachiketa. He arrives after 3 days. So I just want to remind you here again, 3 days in Yamaloka equals 3 years on earth. So query an inner vision only for Nachiketa. It is not actually he waited in Yamaloka for 3 days. Okay. So I hope you find that interesting. So our friend Nachiketa is waited for 3 days and Yama then says, okay, I will now give him darshan. So now the question that we'll ask is, why did Yama make him wait for 3 days? He could have made him wait for 2 days, or he could have even made him wait for 5 days. Why did he make him wait for 3 days? He might have even given him darshan after a couple of hours, but he didn't. He made him wait for 3 days. Okay. Anybody wants to take that question as to why Yama could have made him wait for 3 days? Okay, so
because Yama's abode will be crossing 3 worlds.
Okay, so you think this is something to do with three worlds, Devalji. Thank you. Very interesting. Anybody else? I think Neetaji had something.
I know he gets 3 boons afterwards, but I don't know whether he knows that those 3 boons he's going to ask. So that doesn't.
Yeah. Thank you, Neetaji. Pragnesh ji.
Out of the 4 purushartha, the 3 purushartha, so artha, kama and dharma, and then lastly moksha. So first 3 steps before reaching moksha.
Yeah, wonderful, Pragnesh ji. So all very interesting thoughts there about 3. So I'm pleased that the number
Madhu,
3.
is it all that number 3s, the 3 Vedas, 3 states of waking, dream, and deep sleep, then all the 3s, Uma. I thought it's all that because our Vedas have given a lot of importance for 3s, past, present, future, 3 gunas.
Yeah,
I thought
wonderful.
some
Yeah. So wonderful, Shilaji. Yeah, that's also a very, very interesting insight into why 3 days. So I think all the views are very, very appropriate and relevant to this discussion. And another one that I want to add on to this is that that Yama is very keen to pass on that philosophy by giving him 3 boons. And to give him 3 boons, he wanted to create an environment where he is justified in giving him 3 boons. So he decides to wait for 3 days. He decides to wait for 3 days so that after 3 days, he'll give darshan to Nachiketa, and then the whole thing can progress afterwards. So I agree with all the interesting ideas that have come about, that 3 again is an important number. So Yama, of course, then he gives darshan after 3 days. But before he gives darshan, so Yama has now appeared. He has just come to the doorsteps. He's just walking down and he's thinking, okay, our friend Nachiketa has come. He's waiting for 3 days. Let me go and say hello to him and invite him. So before he does that, Shamala Devi is there, consort of Yama, always with Yama, right? So there is a conversation there between Shamala Devi and Yama. There is a conversation that happens, and that is documented in the subsequent 2 verses. So let's go through that. So Shamala is telling Yama, Vaishwanaraha pravishati atitir brahmano gruhan tasya etam shantim kuruvanti hara vaivasvata udakam. Okay, very, very nice words. Vaishwanaraha pravishati atitir brahmano gruhan tasya etam shantim kuruvanti hara vaivasvata udakam. Asha pratikshe sangatam sunrutam cha ishta purte putra pashum cha sarvan etad vrunte purushasya alpamedasa yasya anashnan vasati brahmano gruhe. Okay, see, those are the 2 key verses that Shamala actually tells Yama. And in that discussion, there is this whole philosophy of how do we run our affairs of providing charity. What is charity? Because our friend's dad Uddalaka has been pretending to be doing some charity, but actually giving old cows and so on. So here the Shamala is actually talking to Yama in a conversation where through that we understand what is it that charity is all about. What does it mean to feed the hungry? Why should the hungry be attended to promptly and with respect? So these are all important cultural things in Vedic India, in Bharat Varsha, where giving that food, Annadana, was so important in the Vedic tradition. And Shamala is actually bringing it here. But before she says, if you don't do your charities properly, what will happen is what this verse talks about. Before that, she actually alerts Yamas, look, Vaishwanara has come. Vaishwanaraha pravishati. Atithi, Brahmano, Gruhan, Tasya Etam, Shantim Kurvanti Haravaivasvata Udakam. So it's a very, very, very nice verse that captures some ideas. And as I told you before, the Kataka Upanishad and Bhagavad Gita are very closely related to each other. The philosophy of Kataka is the philosophy of Gita. Okay, and the philosophy of Gita is the philosophy of Kataka Upanishad. So, and that is the reason why reading these two is very, very essential. Some of you may know, and I'm very familiar, that many verses of the Gita actually appear in Kataka Upanishad. So when it appears, I'll bring those alerts and we'll have the discussion. So one such thing here is Vaishwanaraha. So the concept of Vaishwanaraha that has actually appeared here. Vaishwanaraha pravishati. Okay. So who is this Vaishwanaraha? So I'm going to invite one of us to recite chapter 15, 14th verse. Who is going to take that on? Pragneshji, go for it.
Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamasrita Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyannam Chaturvidam.
Beautiful, Pragnesh. So this verse comes in chapter 15. Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha. So we need to ask, when Shamala is saying Vaishwanaraha Pravishati, so what is that Shamala is talking about? Vaishwanaraha literally can mean fire. Yeah. So what is that Vaishwanaraha? Is it the material fire? Is it the fire god? Or is it the supreme being? So we need to think about why did she use the word Vaishwanara. And when we did this verse in our Gita discussion, I've just extracted it from the previous PowerPoint slides. When we look at Vaishwanara, it is etymological, right? Full and full etymological. So we need to look at what does that Vaishwanara mean. So Aham Vaishwanara. So that becomes Aham Vai Shwa Naraha Bhutva. That means what? Shwa means dog. Naraha means humans. Aham Vai. I am. Krishna says, I am inside the soul of a dog and the soul of a man as their antaryami. So that's very, very clear. Aham Vai Shwa Naraha Bhutva. And then this verse also means Aham Vaishwanaraha. I am called Vaishwanaraha. Okay, my name. Krishna says, my name is also Vaishwanara. There is endless evidence in Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka, Rig Veda, Mandukya Upanishad, where this Vaishwanara comes again and again. And of course, in our Katha Upanishad, we are dealing with this. So Vaishwanara can be a name of this Brahman. In fact, our founding father, Vedavyasa, has done an adhikaranam on Vaishwanara. And there is a sutra, Vaishwanaraha Sadharana Shabda Visheshat Smaryamanam Anumanam Syaditi. So there are those rules of interpretation that Vedavyasa has given as to who this Vaishwanaraha is. So for our brief discussion, all that is required now is to understand that in the most important or Parama Mukhya Vritti or the ultimate sense, Vaishwanaraha means Brahman, the all digesting principle. It is Brahman that creates and also destroys. So he is the all digesting principle. So Aham Vaishwanaraha. So Vishwanara Sambanditva. This same Vaishwanaraha is actually inside each one of us as a gastric fire. So says the Upanishad. Yeah, Vaishwanaraha can also mean the gastric fire. What is that? Your stomach. When you're hungry, what happens? Your stomach burns. So the Rishis equate the fact that the stomach burns when you're hungry is because of Vaishwanaraha. That Vaishwanaraha is there, waiting to receive the food, so that food is the sacrifice and that can be processed and distributed to the rest of the body. And as you know, Krishna in this verse, Prana Apana Samayuktaha Pachami Annam Chaturvidam, and he talks about this. So Vaishwanaraha Pravishati means, see, this Vaishwanara has come to your place. So that is what Shamala is saying. This fellow has been waiting for 3 days. And what does that mean when he is waiting for 3 days? 3 days, his stomach is empty and his stomach is burning. And that Vaishwanaraha has actually come to your house. And who is this fellow who has come for 3 days? He is Atithi. Okay. And he says, he describes this Nachiketa as Atithi. So I'm going to pause there. What is Atithi? What do we think Atithi means? And what is Atithi? What is Abhyagata? So any ideas, any contributions there? Who is an Atithi?
Atithi is a guest who comes to the house.
Thank you, Padmaja. So the
Tithi.
question there is, sorry, who's the other one?
Who comes to the house without telling, without the Tithi.
Yes, thank you, Pratibhaji. So both of you are right. And so anybody who comes home as a guest, yes, is an Atithi. But primarily an Atithi means who comes without any advance notice. Yeah, Tithi means what? Tithi means you give an appointment. This particular day, this particular time, I am going to come. But Tithi means this fellow turns up without giving any appointments. He just come and say, Bhavati Bhikshan Dehi, I am hungry, please feed me. So that is Atithi. Okay. The Atithi etymology is also interesting in another aspect. You can also break it into Athi and Thi. Thi means Tha. Tham means food in Sanskrit. So food is Tham. Who is hungry, who needs to eat food is called Thi. Atithi means that fellow who is very hungry. Okay, so Atithi has got those kind of meanings. So that is the beauty of our language, right? So you actually get the inner meaning. When I say in English, I'm very hungry, what does that mean? Nothing. Whereas when I say Atithi has come, you get so many of these ideas. A plus Tithi or Athi plus Thi. Whereas in the modern society, where we are all living at this point, every person who comes to our house is a Abhyagata. So what is that? We all give so I don't, I mean, in my household, of course, having a dinner party means it needs to be organized 3 to 4 weeks before that. We need to look at the calendar and organize who is on call, who is not on call, who can come, what is the duration, what is the time, when, evening 4, 6, all those things that we do, we plan ahead. And then we get guests and then we feed them. Okay, so those guests technically are not really atithis from a Vedic perspective. They are all abhyagatas. Okay, so this atithi becomes an important concept in Taittiriya Upanishad. So in the Sikshavali, in the first kanda, you know, this famous verse, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Atithi Devo Bhava, says Taittiriya Upanishad in Sikshavali. And it gives a great emphasis on this atithi. Why? Because why is Atithi Devo Bhava? Why is it like God himself is coming? Vaishwanara pravishati atithir brahmano gruhan, as the verse says. Because this Vaishwanara himself is coming when you're hungry. It is like God himself has come. Okay, so that is the key philosophies behind what Shyamala is telling us about who actually an atithi is, and when he comes, what should you be doing? Okay, Vaishwanaraha pravishati atithir. So this Nachiketa is an atithi because Yama didn't ask for him to come. His dad said, Mrutyave tva dadamiti. So he said, okay, fine. And he just decided to come to Yamaloka. Yama had not planned this. Yamadutas had not planned, and they're not going with those ropes to catch him. He is just accidentally turned up to his doorstep. So he is clearly an atithi. And look at Shyamala, she actually labels Nachiketa as Brahmana. This fellow is only 8 years old. Okay, he is only 8 years old, but he labels him as Brahmana, not because he's born to a Brahmin. Okay, that is a stupid thing to do in modern society. Just because somebody is born in the family of Kshatriya doesn't become a Kshatriya. Just because somebody is born in the family of so-called Brahmin doesn't become a Brahmana. That is a stupid way of looking at things. This is the problem in modern India, but that is a separate problem. Brahmana means, Brahma, as you know, means the Vedas. Brahma also means Brahman. Okay, he who knows the Vedas and thereby knows Brahman is the Brahmana. Okay, so in that sense, all of us are Brahmanas because we are studying the Vedas and we are trying to make an attempt to know the Brahman. So that is how Shyamala compliments Nachiketa, who is only 8 years of age, but he's got so much wisdom, and she compliments him as Brahmano Gruhan. So Gruhan means what? House. Whose house? Yama's house. Yamaloka. So Shyamala says, Vaishwanaraha pravishati atithir brahmano gruhan. Hello, Yama, my husband, look, Nachiketa has been waiting for you for 3 days. He's hungry and he's got a stomach that is burning. That Vaishwanaraha has come home. So what should you do immediately? Tasya etam shantim kurvanti hara vaivaswata udakam. Okay, so he says, Tasya etam shantim kurvanti. That means this fellow has come with a stomach that is burning. He's waiting for 3 days. He has not eaten anything. He has not drunk any water. He is hungry. His stomach is burning. So what should you do? You should immediately pacify him. How do you pacify him? Give him some water. Okay. Hara udakam. Udakam, as you know, is water. Hara means go and get, fetch. Those are all the meanings of that. Hara udakam. Why? So that you cool him down. Shantim kuruvanti. Okay. Cool him down, because this fellow may be irritable because he's hungry for 3 days. First, cool him down. How do you cool him down? Give him some water. Okay. And Shyamala says here, Vaivashvata. And he calls her husband Vaivashvata. So why does she call Yama Vaivashvata? So that's a small quiz. We did this last week. The clue is in the slide itself. Because Yama is Vivashwan's son, Surya's son. Yama is Surya's son in the Vedic pantheon, and Vivashwan's son becomes Vaivashvata. Okay, so Vaivashvata Udakam. Okay, so that is why some of you may be familiar. Udaka means three. There are 3 components to Udaka, right? Argyam, Padyam, and Achamaniyam. So when we all do pujas, right? Arjyam samarpayami, padyam samarpayami, achamaniyam samarpayami. We do all this without any idea what it is. So arjyam means washing your hands. Padyam means washing your legs. And then achamaniyam means then drink water. So that is what Shamala is saying. Go, Nachiketa has been waiting for 3 days. Go and wash his hands. Go and wash his legs. Give him some water first. Please look after him because he's been waiting for you for 3 days. And in that philosophy, Shamala is telling us how we should look after an Atithi. We are unfortunate that we are living in a society, we just don't have that opportunity of Atithi. In fact, if an Atithi comes to our front door, we usually say, why has this fellow turned up without any notice? So that is how our society has become. But on the Vedic times, having Atithi was a big deal. In fact, I am told in Bharat Varsha in those times, once food has been cooked, people will actually go outside the house and wait if an Atithi is going to come. And if an Atithi comes, they're very happy to feed him first and then consume their food. So that is how it used to be. And this is what Shamala is actually giving us an idea as to how it was those days. So what now happens? The next one there is, what would happen if Atithi is not looked after properly? Okay. So if, for example, she admonishes or she gives a warning, Yama, if you don't look after this Nachiketa properly, what will happen? And through that idea, she's telling all of us, if you do not look after a guest, and if you actually insult your guest, what is going to happen? She will say, Asha, Pratikshe, Sangatam, Sundrutam, Ishta, Purte, Putra, Pashumcha. So these are all the things that we want, right? Ishta, Purte, Putra, Pashum cha Sarvan, Yetad Vrinte, Purushasya Alpamedasa. Yasya Anashnan Vasati Brahmano Gruhan. So the last line is important. Anashnan means what? Somebody who has not eaten anything. Vasati means what? Who stays. Where? Gruhe. Okay, in your house. If a Brahmana comes who has not eaten and he comes to your house, and if you don't look after him properly, these are all the problems you're going to face. What are those problems? You can do your own reading as to what these words essentially mean, but I'm just going to give you a quick understanding of what means. Asha means your desire to know scriptures, for example. Pratikshe, waiting for desires to be filled, being aware of upaya to get knowledge, for example. Sangata means friends, and friendship will be lost because once people know that this fellow did not look after an Atithi properly, your friends will say, what kind of friend is that? Do I really need to have friendship with that chap who does not entertain Atithis? Sundrutam, good talks about you. People are not going to talk good things about you. They're going to say, this fellow is he doesn't treat Atithis properly, he insults. So your reputation goes. Ishta, actions done for our benefit, like how we do Hotram, Tapaha, Satyam, Vedic study, Atityam, Vaishwadeva, all those things goes away. Purte, action done for the benefit of others. If you can't even look after an Atithi, how are you going to build wells? How are you going to construct temples? How are you going to donate food? How are you going to plant trees and gardens? This is what Purte actually means. So these are all the things that people used to do in the Vedic times. Build wells for community, there's charity, they would build wells. If they have wealth, they will build temples. They'll give annadana. They will plant trees and they will have gardens in their house to protect the environment. So that is how the Vedic civilization was. But if you don't even have the basic principle of actually looking after your Atithis properly, all this is not going to happen. Putra and Pashumcha, your children, what kind of children are you going to beget? And how will your children view you? And if you have such philosophy, wrong approach to Atithis, you will not get any cows. And if you don't have cows, how are you going to sustain? How is your economy go and so on? So Shamala, by this conversation, is actually telling us that if you do not do your charity properly, these are all the consequences that you may face without you knowing about it. Yetad vrunte means destroyed. Purushasya alpamedasa. Alpamedasa means what? An ignorant person or a person who doesn't have enough knowledge. About what? About how to look after a Atithi. So in this, Shamala is actually talking about the importance of charity and feeding the hungry. Yeah, I think that is important. And we don't think about these at this point of time, or some of us may be thinking, but maybe have a different view on this. But there is always some reservations, isn't it? Say, for example, I have just bought, our own group is actually very good at this. And I was actually reflecting and said, are we actually doing what what Shamala Devi has told us? Are we actually doing that food charity and stuff? I think we are, at least over the last couple of years as a group, we have got together and we have actually raised funds for so many initiatives. Akshaya Patra, and we have donated thousands for Akshaya Patra. Hungarian food charities, we have donation hundreds. Sudarshan and his team, of course, does a lot of charity work in India, and some of us generously donate. So I think we should carry on doing that in the spirit of what Shamala Devi has actually had that conversation with Yama, and through that conversation, we get the idea of what is the importance of actually doing this food charity. So on that note, I've just put a small print there. I think we should raise some funds for Christmas, New Year. We should raise some food charity. Let's think about it. Maybe a message will come in Sahiti in a few days' time, that maybe we finish off the new year, this year, however painful it was for all of us, by actually raising some funds for a food charity of our choice. So let's do that. So moving on in that spirit. So then what happens? So this conversation between Shamala and Yama has happened. So let's imagine the scene now. Nachiketa has waited for 3 days. Shamala initially asked him to take water and food. He said, no, I don't want anything. I've come here to meet Yama. So he waits for 3 days. And then after 3 days, Yama decides to walk down to the doorsteps. Shamala Devi meets up him there and says, look, your friend, your Nachiketa is waiting. He's the Vaishwanara. He is a Brahmana. Please go and look after him immediately. Because if you don't look after him, you will have all these consequences. Yeah. So try and avoid those consequences and go and look after him. So this is the philosophy. Look, at Yama is such an exalted deity, 12th Vedic pantheon. But Nachiketa, Brahmana, comes and he has to go and look after him. Okay. So Yama goes to Nachiketa and he says, Tisro ratrihi yad avatsihi gruhe me anashnan brahman atithi. So he starts a conversation. So this is significant, because in the Katha Upanishad, this is the first dialogue between Yama and Nachiketa. This is the first dialogue. Then after this, it is going to be only a discussion between Yama and Nachiketa. But look how humble and Yama shows so much humility to Nachiketa. He says, you have waited for 3 nights. Tisro ratrihi yad avatsihi gruheme. Gruheme, my house. Avatsihi, you have been waiting and staying for how long? For 3 nights. In the 3 nights, what has been your state? You have been anashna. You have not eaten anything. But this great Yama, who is such an exalted soul, yeah, he decides what is our fate. When he looks at our karmas and decides what our fate is, such an exalted supreme entity, high entity, and he says to Nachiketa, Brahman, you are Brahman. What that means? You are a Brahmana. You are a well-educated. You are knowledgeable about Brahman. You know about the Vedas. And you are the Atiti. You have come to my house. And he folds his hands and he says, Namasyaha. So this is the beauty of this verse. This great Yama, who is the master of all the fate of souls, actually, he actually invites, he receives Nachiketa. How? He says, Brahman, Atithi, Namasyaha, I bow to you. Namaste astu Brahman. And that's what the next word is. Namaste astu Brahman. I bow to thee. You are the Atithi, you have come to my house. I bow to thee. Swasti me astu. Because you have come, may good things happen to me. So this is what Yama is saying. A Devata actually having that conversation with this small boy. And he says, Namaste astu Brahman, swasti me astu. May good things happen to me. And then he says, Tasmat pratitrin varan vrinishva. Yes. Namaste astu Brahman, swasti me astu. I'm so sorry that I made you wait for 3 days. And because I made you wait for 3 days, I'm going to give you 3 boons that you can ask. Tasmat prati trin varan vrinishva. Okay, so that is how the Katha Upanishad progresses. And again, this is beautiful because Devatas, I put a question mark there. Again, the concept of why this is a vision for Nachiketa. Okay, why this is actually not, this actually he does not go with his gross body. He does not go to Yamaloka, but actually has a vision. Why? I had to put a question there. Do Devatas sleep? Because what did he say here? Tisro ratrihi yadavatsi gruheme. But I've got a question here. Do Devatas sleep? We all sleep for 12 hours, right? Who is going to take that question? Do Devatas sleep? Okay. Yeah, somebody raised hands.
Isn't Vishnu supposed to sleep for 6 months from Shravan? Like the Devuti and Devshayani.
Okay, thank you, Devalji, for that view. Pragnesh, what is your view?
A similar view, Chaturbas we call. So up from Devoti to Devuti, 11. So we same Chaturbas concept.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm not familiar with that, but I'll do some homework and also look at it. But the classic Upanishads view, the Vedic view is Devata. So we are talking about subtle transempirical realms of existence that we can't see with our gross eyes and hear through our gross ears. There, Devatas actually do, the scriptures are very clear. Devatas never sleep, and they even go on to say that Devatas don't have eyelids. They don't have eyelids at all, and they are even called anumishas. Okay, anumishas means those who do not sleep. So Devatas actually do not sleep. So the sleep that you may be talking about is yoga nidra, for example, but that is not the sleep, the sleep that is described in Mandukya Upanishad, for example, where the contact with the external world is completely lost. The Sushupti Avastha and the Swapna Avastha. That kind of avasthas actually do not happen to Devas. Okay, it only happens to Manushas or the ones that are in the Mrityu Loka. But anyway, I hope you find that interesting because Devatas don't sleep, says the scriptures. But again, Yama here is saying, Tisro ratrihi yadavatsihi gruheme. Okay, so again, that is another clue saying that this is probably a vision for Nachiketa. So after he has said that, Brahman, Namaste astu Brahman, Swastibe astu, Tasmat Prati Trin Varan Vrinishwa. I am just hoping to finish at least the first vara that he gives. I was hoping to make entry into the second vara, but I don't think it's going to happen today. Let me tackle the first vara. Okay, sure. So immediately Nachiketa says, okay, Yama, all right, 3 days I waited, you appeared, I'm very happy. I'm even more happy that you're actually going to give me 3 boons. Okay, I accept that. So I'll ask the first boon. So the first boon is very, very sensible, and that is the reason why we need to know the prakarana. Without knowing the contextual relevance of this whole Katha Upanishad so far, we will not be able to appreciate what is it that first vara that Nachiketa has actually asked. And he says like this. Okay, so Yama, this is my first boon. Shanta sankalpaha sumanaha yatasyat vitamanyuhu gautamo ma abhimrutyoho tvat prasrishtam ma abhivadet pratitaha yetat trayanam pratamam varam vrine. So trayanam pratamam varam vrine. The first vara among the 3 that you have given me is this. What is this? He is actually asking about his dad. So how did his dad was very angry with him, right? He did a lot of stupid things. His dad, number 1, he did a stupid thing. What was his stupid thing? He gave old cows to the Brahmanas who came to the ashrama. And then what he did, he got very pissed off and he got angry. And then what he did some bad deeds of actually asking his son to go to Mrityu Loka. So these are all the things that his dad did. So Nachiketa, because he's so respectful of his dad, he actually says, you know what my first vara is, Yamadeva, Shanta Sankalpaha. Let my dad not do any bad deeds. Sumanaha. Let him always do good deeds. Let him always have good thoughts. Let him not have bad thoughts. Let him always have good thoughts. Yatasyat. So make that happen. Vitamanyuhu. Manyuhu means anger. Okay. Vitamanyuhu. Why? Because in anger, he said, Mrityuvetva dadamiti. So please ensure that my dad hereafter does not have any anger. Okay, so give him good thoughts, ensure that he doesn't have bad thoughts, and ensure that he never gets angry. That is my first vara. Who is the dad? He says his dad is Gautama. And that is why, if you remember, when we discussed the pedigree of Uddalaka, what is he called? This Gautama here means it's not a Gautama Buddha. Gautama means this Uddalaka is from Gautama Gotra. So he says, my dad is Gautama. So for that Gautama Gotra person, my dad, ensure he has Shantak Sankalpaha, Sumanaha Yatasyad, Vitamanyuhu Gautamo, Ma Abhimrutyoho Tvat Prasrishtam. So you should send me back. Okay, please send me back to my dad. Okay, first thing he says is, let my dad have all these good nature things, no bad thinking, no bad thought process, always good process, no good thought process, no anger. Then you know what you should do after you have done all this, ensure that I actually go back. Okay. He is not saying, oh, send me to Swarga. I've come this far and waited for 3 days. Let me have good time with Apsaras and have a lot of music and enjoy here. He is not saying that. He says, Ma abhimrutyoho tvat prasrishtam. Send me back. Once you have sent me back, Ma abhivadet pratitaha. Abhivadet means what? Once I go back to that gross body that I left, my dad must talk to me nicely. First, he must recognize me, pratitaha. He must first recognize me, and then he must be happy to see me, and that he must talk to me nicely. Okay, this is what is the first vara the Nachiketa actually asks. Okay, so this is interesting. Why did he say abhivadet tat pratitaha? Tvat pratitaha is important because if, for example, this gross body, if this person has left, if Nachiketa with a subtle body has left that gross body, that is actually a dead body, right? And that dead body is not going to respond. So if Nachiketa comes back and gets into that body again, how can Gautama know that this is the same Nachiketa's jiva that has come here? It could be some other ghost or somebody that might have come inside the body. So to ensure that that is not the case, or Nachiketa is very clever. He says, when I go in, he should be able to recognize me that it is the same Nachiketa who has again entered into this gross body. And he must be happy to see me, and that he must talk to me nicely. Okay. So this is the first vara that he asks. Okay. Yetat trayanam pratamam varam vrune. Okay, so this is again important because our Gautama has scolded and he said, Mrutyuve tva dadaniti, and then he says, he goes to Yama and Nachiketa says, I want to come back. So now the next verse is important for you to understand, and to understand the next verse, you need to have the background. So what happened? Our Nachiketa fell down unconscious. Then he had a vision. Then what happened? Overnight, the situation is, Uddalaka is very upset. And he's got his dead son. He thinks his son is dead. And he has him on his lap. And he's crying and he said, what a mistake I have committed by actually scolding and telling my son off and actually saying, Mrutyave tva dadami iti. And he is very upset all night. But then in the meantime, all these conversation has happened with Yama. And the following morning, after a few hours, our Nachiketa is going to wake up. Okay, so that is what Yama says here. Yama says, okay, very nice vara that you have asked. So before we go into that, I just want to remind one very interesting analogy that we should not forget. One is, Nachiketa was a small boy and he asks that, I don't want this, I don't want to go to Swargaloka and enjoy it, but just give my dad some good sense so that he is able to receive me. And I want to remind you, this is very similar to our Prahalad. When Narasimha kills Hiranyakashipu, and many of you would be very familiar with that story, that it is the Prahalada who actually asks the same vara, similar kind of vara to Narasimha and says, look, give my dad Hiranyakashipu some good sense. So this is very similar. So I hope you are able to link that stories, Nachiketa's first vara and Prahalada's first asking that vara to Narasimha also. Okay. So immediately what Yama said, Yata purastad bhavita pratitaha auddaliki arunihi sukam ratrihi shayita vitamanyuhu tvam dadrushavan mrutyumukat pramuktam. Okay. So that is again very simple verses here to understand. Yata purastad bhavita pratitaha. Granted, your boon is granted. He will recognize you. How? Yata purastad. Okay. As how he recognized you before, similarly, he will recognize you. Yes, I will send you back. Yata purastad bhavita pratitaha auddalikihi arunihi. Okay, so this is how Yama addresses Uddalaka. Okay, remember, Nachiketa said Gautama. And before that, we have said Vajashravasah. So this Uddalaka has got so many names. And this word, Auddaliki Arunihi, is important because from this word, we actually understand that this Uddalaka, this grandfather's, sorry, how shall I put it? So our Uddalaka or Vajashravasah or Aruni is no else other than he is the grandson of Uddalaka. So that is why it is called Auddaliki Arunihi. Okay. Mat Prasishtaha. I will ensure he is happy to see and receive you. Sukam Ratri Shayita. So this is important. And that is again is an internal evidence to say that this is all an inner vision. Why? Because he says Shukam Ratri Shayita. That means what? Your dad from now on will sleep well in the night. Why? Because you have come here, he is actually holding you in his lap and he's crying all night and he hasn't slept all night. But once you go back, once he recognizes you, from now on, he will actually sleep well at night. We sometimes don't sleep well at night only for a couple of reasons. Either we are sad or we are angry. Those are the only two reasons why we can't sleep properly. So that is exactly what our Yama is saying, that Sukam Ratrihi Shayita. Okay, Vitamanyuhu, he will have no anger. Tvam Dadrushavan, after seeing you. After seeing you, how have you been? Mrutyumukat Pramuktam, who has returned or escaped from the clutches of death. He said, this is my first vara. You asked for the first vara that you want to go back to your dad, but your dad should be nice. Yes, granted. I give you the first vara. So that is the first vara. So I think we will stop here because the second vara, then the second boon has a background. Okay, I'll just recite the verses today and then we will go into the details next week because we are running out of time. So the next vara, Nachiketa, then immediately elevates the philosophy. Okay, so this is important. First vara, he said he wants to go back to his dad. The second one, he says, Swarge loke nabayam kinchanasti na tatratvam na jaraya bibeti ube tirtva ashanaya pipase shokadiko modate swargaloke. Satvam agnim swargyam adyeshi mrityoho prabruhi tvam shraddayam mahyam. Swargaloka amrutatvam bhajanta etad dvitiyena vrine varena. Okay, so what he is saying is, thank you for the first vara, granting my first vara. My second vara is, I want to know about that fire sacrifice that will actually take me to Swargaloka. Okay, this is important. What that Swargaloka is. What is that Swargaloka that Nachiketa is talking about? And he qualifies the Swargaloka that he is talking about. Nabayam kinchanasti. There is no fear there. Na tatratvam. This is very important. Na tatratvam. In that Swargaloka, you are not there. That's what Nachiketa says. Yama, you are also not there in that Swargaloka. So that is the clue in that verse as to what that Swargaloka that Nachiketa is talking about. What is the etymology of Swargaloka? what are the various views on Swargaloka and so on. So those are all the things that we need to discuss, which is very interesting from a Sanatana Dharma perspective, because there are the temporary Swargalokas and there is the permanent Swargaloka. So which one is Nachiketa after, and how Yama talks to him about the whole science. So this is important, and I want to spend a lot of time talking about this, the science behind the kunda, the sticks, the bricks. How do you do that fire sacrifice? Every concept in that fire sacrifice is extremely important for us to understand. When we go to the temple and do havan, it is not just throwing something. There's a whole lot of science and philosophy behind it. What is the philosophy of 360? What is again the philosophy of threes? Everything comes in these two verses, and then Nachiketa asks these questions, and Yama then goes on to explain to some extent. But to understand the deep philosophy of that, unless one reads it from a Guru Mukha, unless we get those knowledge from the gurus, it's not going to happen, because much of it has not been written in the Katha Upanishad, because these are esoteric knowledge. Yeah, Upanishad, as you know, is upahvara, secret knowledge. So that is usually rendered in discussion. So hopefully what I'll do is I'll make an attempt next time around to talk about this philosophy of 360 bricks, and the number 3 is how they come, and how that Agni fire sacrifice should be done. Who is this Agni that Yama is talking about, who will take us to permanent Swarga? Okay, so we will deal with that next week. Next week we have chapter 8, Gita Chintana, and the following week we will deal with this. So on that note, Krishna Pranamastu, and thank you so much for listening. So any questions is very welcome.
Namaskar, Madhusudanji. I was just thinking about this Satyavan Savitri also is the same story, you know, where she goes, the husband dies and she's a pativrata, she goes and asks for 3 boon. Is this something it could be done, is it? It is a science actually where this Upanishads is telling like whoever is seeking you to go beyond death. So it is one kind of like how you have Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga and all. Is there some kind of yoga where you can go? There are so
Yes.
many stories, even in Myanmar, if you see, there are some stories where it tells like a devotee, he lives, he goes. So there are so many such stories I've heard and read.
Yeah, sure, Pratibhaji. I'm not fully knowledgeable with Satyavan Savitri's story and the background and the philosophy behind it, but from what you said, it sounds very similar. So now this Agni sacrifice and everything is very much within Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, okay, and Dhyana Yoga. Okay, so nothing is outside this. There are only 4 ways, and it is a mixture of these 4. So what do you have? You have Karma Yoga, then we have Jnana Yoga, then you have Dhyana Yoga, and then you have Bhakti Yoga. So there are these 4 margas, and these 4 margas have to be mixed with each other. The key there is that Bhakti. So your Karma, Jnana, and Dhyana has to be infused with Bhakti Yoga. So this is the way to go to Swarga, a permanent Swarga, not just going to the Loka where all the Apsaras and all the music is played. You just dance and have a good time and then come back. So no, that is not the Swarga. You want to go beyond that, which is the Turiya state that Pragneshti was talking about, that moksha. So for that, this is the route, and the fire sacrifice and everything else that is described, certainly going to be discussed in next week, is actually explaining what is it that Krishna actually talks about. Yeah, that is why it becomes important. The Karma Jnana Dhyana Yoga that we have done so far in our Gita Chintane, why is that to be done and how it is to be done and so on, is what Yama actually tells Nachiketa. And that is how the Gita is inspired by these Upanishads. And as you know, Gita is the essence of Upanishads, and Gita explains this in great detail. So there is no way outside the 4 margas, unfortunately. So it will have to be within this. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Thank you. Namaskar. Very clear. Yeah.
Hello, Madhu.
Yeah, Nita.
It's about the jivas, you know, in the boiling, like vegetables, etc. So, but the Gita says, of course, they won't die in boiling, because nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha. that bit is there. So it's actually not death, but just torture or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah, they just have to experience the karmic reactions. You're absolutely right. And that is why the Yamaduta has said, Sasyamiva jayate punaha, Sasyamiva martyaha pachyate, Sasyamiva jayate punaha. So like how the jivas get cooked in the vegetables when you eat your food and they take birth, similarly you will come, because there is no actual death for you. It is just your eternal, but you will have to go through these cycles. The birth for you is having a gross body. The death for you is giving up your gross body. Absolutely the same view, Neetaji. Yeah, thanks for that.
Can I ask a question?
They will, yes, go on.
Yeah, so you are introducing a concept of a permanent Swarga. How is that different than Satyaloka?
Yeah, good question. So Satyaloka is still in the material plane. Where Chaturmukha Brahma is there, yeah? Where Chaturmukha Brahma is there, he is also still in the material plane. Only the Mahapralaya that the view is that he will take all his the batch of jivas who joined him in Satyaloka and take them to moksha. So the Swarga, that the permanent Swarga that Nachiketa is talking about, is that Swarga. Okay, so we look at etymology and so on. So I'll just give a hint here. So Swarga. So what is the etymology of Swarga? What does Swarga actually means? So you split it out. Sorry, Pragnesh, go for it.
It was in the slide. Swa Ramayana Gamati.
Correct. Well done. You closely watch the slides. Yeah. Swa Ramanam Gamayati. Swa Ramanam means what? Your inner bliss. Gamayati. You attain that state. Your inner bliss. When do you attain your inner bliss? Devalji, when do you attain your inner bliss?
In your moksha.
Absolutely. So that is the primary etymology of Swarga. Then, of course, you have the material Swarga, which includes Yama's abode, Indra's abode, all the demigods that you have in the Vedic pantheon, their abodes. Then you have Chaturmukha Brahma's abode. They are all still part of this material Swargaloka. The only exception of Chaturmukha's abode is once you go there, you will sit there. And then from there, you will go to moksha. Once you go to Satyaloka, you don't come back. You go, because at that, you go to Satyaloka only when you have exhausted all your karmic imprints. So when you don't have any further karmas, then you go and sit in Satyaloka. And then when Mahapralaya happens, you will cross over to the other side. So that is the grand view of this. Yeah, but Pragnesh, well done. Thank you. I'm really impressed that you looked at that slide.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, if there are no further questions, shall I request Harish to take us through Om, please, and we'll close today's session.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone. So see you next week for chapter 8. Devalji is coordinating chapter 8, which promises again to be amazing. We got excellent quiz masters on board. So please join us next Sunday. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Mother. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.